All right, let's get started. Let's see, main story, intro. All right, hello everybody. My name is Brandon Lau, and today I want to dive into the topic of 20 years of war, how conflicts affect countries economically. Personally, what got me invested in this subject, my hobby is I like to watch documentaries, and I'm really interested in military history and geopolitics. So when it comes to wars, people tend to think of them as like, um, they kind of try to think of it as like, oh, there's a lot of guns and like missiles and like people dying and whatnot. And yes, that is true. Very sad. But I wanted to like kind of dive a little deeper into talking about how they affect economically, like what measures are taking place. Every soldier needs a uniform. They need a gun. They need equipment. They need food. They need logistics. You need to fly them to the enemy if you want to invade someone. I want to see how they affect the country's GDP spending. How much of their GDP spending? How much soldiers are getting enlisted? Are there any arms imports? How do fellow allies like kind of like are affected economically? And this kind of ties into my question as to like for this subject that I want to answer for my Tableau analysis is how does major conflict affect military spending? And in this sense, when it comes to military, like when it comes to wars or just conflicts in general, is spending increased in response at a linear scale or an exponential scale? Second, what were the military expenditures for the parties involved in historical conflicts? So when wars are fought between two or more countries, of course, right? And it's never as simple as two countries having their spending just go up. You need to see, do they go up at similar rates? Are they following a similar trend line? Is one having a different trend line than for the other? And is there a reason why that is? I want to kind of look into what happened at that point in time. Can we predict military spending utilizing forecasting methods? So I kind of want to say that even though we're looking at historical events, can we see, like if, like let's say we were a government official at the time or head of state, can we at the time with the limited information we have in the past predict reliably how future spending would turn out? Like if we can like predict like a numerical value with a certain level of confidence that, hey, this is our spending 2 years from now, 5 years from now, crazy amount, 10 years from now. And lastly, does political developments affect military decisions in defense? So kind of tying back, does political developments like things like peace deals, treaty organizations, new declarations of war, or just changes in the status quo, how does it affect military spending in an economic sense? The first scenario I want to go over is the 1992 Bosnian War. Just a little brief history. And there's a country called Yugoslavia. It doesn't exist anymore. It used to be a former Soviet bloc country. And in 1992, Bosnia declared independence of Yugoslavia. So I'm just going to expand this. So here in 1992, Bosnia-Herzegovina, not today, declared independence from Yugoslavia. And Yugoslavia and Serbian nationalists declared war. So in these three graphs, we see Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia and Serbia. And this is the armed forces personnel. So we can, if we hover over them, we can tell like, hey, this is how many people were serving in the army for these respective countries at the time. We can see that throughout the years, it can be said spending went up. So due to conflict, but whereas where Bosnia has this traditional increase in spending, the other two countries do not. The reason being is kind of due to the underlying political factors and circumstances. So Bosnia, first I want to point out, actually does not have a value in 1993. This is because the Bureau of Military, their Bureau of Military Affairs at the time was based in Sarajevo, which is their capital, and they were getting bombed. So they unfortunately had bigger problems on their plate and did not have official figures at the time, hence the lack of data in 1993. For 1993, for Croatia and Serbia, we actually see a downward increase. And this is not because of staggering losses. It's actually, interesting enough, division in forces. So a lot of the armed forces personnel that were in Croatia and Serbia at the time actually dropped out of the army and joined like kind of like de facto separatist movements, like kind of like unorganized militias. We can see this apparent for both Serbia and Croatia. Croatia has a little bit of a unique circumstance. They actually backed the Bosnians in the beginning of the war, but because like deeper ethnic issues, a part of the Croatian army actually split off. So this is actually why we have a decrease for Croatia. Whereas Serbia has a decrease because they joined separatists and they took heavy losses in the beginning years of the war. Second, I would like to illustrate in the sense of like percent of GDP for South Korea. This is the 2017 North Korean missile crisis. Pretty much North Korea shot like 7 nuclear missiles over both the Sea of Japan and Japan itself. This caused a huge uproar in like the UN, NATO, and South Korea and Japan specifically. So South Korean Prime Minister at the time, Lee Nak-yeon, vowed to increase the defense budget. At the time, obviously, they didn't really have any solid plans, but it increased drastically. This is a percent, this is a calculated field. Pretty much military spending for that country divided by their GDP gets you the percent. But military spending, even though it increased like from like 0.2, 0.3, that we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. This is a country, a little percent like that changes the scope of war or potential of war, and they want to be more prepared. So we see that within just 3 years, we almost see like pretty much 100% like increase, a ticket jump in military spending because of the increased conflict or threat of conflict between North Korea and South Korea. Yeah, if you can see annotations right here. And lastly, we have the 2001 Afghan War. This one I like to see a little differently. Instead of just looking at like what happened, I want to see more in a sense of like, can we at the time predict what happened? So let's say we are a person, like an official or the head of state at the time. I think it's Biden. No, not Biden. Bush. Jesus Christ, George Bush. We just got 2 towers. Just got planes went in them. Bam. That was really sad. These people don't like us. We need to start ramping up our spending. Can we, based on former years, can we predict what spending will be in the future? And we, to an extent, can. So I actually have my trend line right here. So it has like R squared with a value, and there's a baseline because we're not going to have any military spending. So by filtering out the values or the years at the time, we can actually change the trend line. So if I go over here, trend line, I can filter the years. Yeah, I can filter the years right here, and it will shift the trend line. So prior the invasion of Afghanistan, prior the terrorist attacks, we see we have a very flat, but then as we include the latter years, our spending actually goes way up. So indicating an exponential increase in military spending. So what we can say is that given limited information, we can to a degree predict that we're going to experience an exponential growth, but the lack of data in the future changes our trend line. So obviously the more data we have, the more accurate trend line is. But I can say to a varying degree, we can use former military spending to predict future conflicts, although political and military developments will change our spending in the future. So that ties it up. Here in the final, I have my 3 graphs. And I would just like to say, going back to my summary, did we answer the questions? Did I answer the questions that we initially had to ask? And how has a major conflict affect military spending? We realize that it's exponential. In most cases, they cannot prepare, we need X amount of money for that date. It doesn't work like that. The countries have to prepare for the worst. They have to consider their national interest. And we find that the trend to be for Western countries or any country in general to be an exponential increase in military spending. Military expenditures for parties involved in conflict, acknowledging the external circumstances, I can say that for military expenditures for parties, it's very similar. Countries that are in conflict will numerically have different spending levels, but they will follow a similar trend line, as you can see in the Bosnian War. They will follow a certain positive trend line unless there's extenuating circumstances. Can we predict future military spending using a forecasting method? To a degree, we can. We can definitely use prior years to determine it, but declarations of war can, skew it drastically. So if I was a party at the time, like a military DoD official, I would forecast that if we go into war, we have to account for that just massive increase. Like it's an exponential increase in military spending. And do political developments affect military decisions on defense? Yes, we can see that with the North Korean missile crisis, that it's just something as like another country not acknowledging or like respecting our wishes, like in this case, denuclearization, that can lead to a very dramatic increase in military decisions. And to shift military spending from an entire percent up from almost like 2.5% to almost 3%, that's dramatic. We're talking $100 billion. So to tie it in, answer my questions, and that is it. Thank you guys for listening to me present. Have a good day.